and welcome back to the program. We have a fine program indeed. Let's get to it, shall we? My first guest tonight came to the attention of American audiences as one of the members of Monty Python's Flying Circus, the one who happened to play the organ nude and appear in drag. He has also directed The Life of Brian and the forthcoming The Meaning of Life, and he is the author of this book, an intriguing bit of work. This is a book entitled Fairy Tales, and that's just what it is. Welcome, please, Mr. Terry Jones.
Terry, how are you?
Nice to see you. Unbelievable, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? My heavens.
Rolling over and waving my paw.
Very nice.
And now, peekaboo. There you go.
Darned impressive.
Any
Darned impressive.
stupid dog can do it like I can, eh?
Let me, before we get into the meat of this, as they say, before they get into the meat of it, tell me about your experience flying from, was it London last night?
Oh, London, yes. Gosh, it was last night, was it?
Was it? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we were just taking off. It was half an hour in the plane, leaving London Airport, and suddenly this voice comes over, very calm, English, suave captain's voice comes over and says, yeah, somebody just found a note in the men's room. Whoever wrote it, please come and have a word with me, please. And so we all sat there thinking, what is it? And about half an hour later, he says, very cool voice. Nobody panics, Very cool voice says, well, we're going to have to land at Shannon Airport after all. Just nothing much, something wrong with the plane. Everybody sits there absolutely icy cold. Nobody moves, not a flick of an eyelid. We land. 5 hours later, we take off again. And after we've been going for a bit, the captain, very cool voice, comes out again and says, I expect you were wondering what all that was about. Well, we had a note, saying there was a bomb on board. Panic! Everybody panic!
Oh, yeah. Oh. That's ugly. That's probably my worst
Yes.
nightmare. But weren't people just edgy and nasty up to that point?
No, absolutely nothing happened.
Well, did they get the guy and beat him up, or?
Well, they say he said he actually wrote the letter. The guy who found it actually wrote the letter. So,
Yeah. Did you get a look at the guy?
No.
Well, Terry, he's here tonight. Would you bring him out?
Great!
Boy, that's just a darned ugly experience, I would think. Now, tell me about the book of fairy tales. It actually is fairy tales, isn't it?
Actually fairy tales. The kind of fairy tales you've never heard before,
Yeah.
I hope.
How did this come about? What sort of a project is this to fall
Well,
into?
I was reading fairy tales to my daughter, Sally, who was then about 5, and I was reading her Grimm's and Hans Andersen and things like that. And I kind of found they were a bit long and a bit sort of, a bit nasty, some of them. I mean, things like the, have you ever read Grimm's version of Snow White? I mean, at the end of it, the fairy godmother, the wicked auntie, has to put on red-hot iron slippers and dance until she's dead, Like, it's bedtime, you're reading this to your 5-year-old daughter. You say, what? I can't read that.
Red-hot iron slippers and dance till she's dead.
That's right. Oh, Daddy, read me that again, would you please?
Yes.
I'd enjoy that. So I thought I'd write my own, and...
Would you mind reading just the beginning of one of them, The Silly King?
The Silly King, yeah?
Just,
No.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, you can
read
find it. It's your
yes.
book. You certainly know
It's
where
my
it ought
book,
to
isn't it?
appear there.
I know, the book's got words in it. Oh, yeah, this is called... this is The Silly King, yes.
Just the first couple of paragraphs
Okay. Are you all sitting comfortably? Good, then we'll begin. King Herbert the 12th had ruled wisely and well for many years, but eventually he grew very old, and although his subjects continued to love him dearly, they all had to admit that as he'd grown older, he had started to do very silly things. One day, for example, King Herbert went out of his palace and walked down the street with a dog tied to each leg. Another time, he took off all his clothes and sat in the fountain in the principal square, singing selections of popular songs and shouting, "Radishes!" at the top of his voice. Nobody, however, liked to mention how silly their king had become. Even when he hung from the spire of the great cathedral, dressed as a parsnip and throwing Turkish dictionaries at the crowd below, no one had the heart to complain. In private, they'd shake their heads and say, "Poor old Herbert, whatever will he do next?" But in public, everyone pretended that the king was as grave and as wise as he'd always been. Yeah. And it goes on like that.
That's the Silly King.
That's the Silly
Very
King.
nice.
Little picture of the Silly King.
Very impressive.
In that picture, he's hitting people with a haddock, which is another habit.
What can you tell us about the new film, The Meaning of Life?
Meaning of Life? Well, it's extremely dirty, actually.
Filthy.
Filthy, yes. There are some of the dirtiest things I've ever seen on film in it. I can't actually demonstrate them, but I think if we get one of the dogs, they could probably show you what I meant. It's kind of... it's not an awful lot I can say, really. It's... it tells you all about human life, really, from the birth to the grave. The title of the film is The Meaning of Life. Modest little title, we thought. But it is specifically, I should say, actually, it is specifically aimed at fish, basically. I mean, we sort of realise, you know, that if you look at the North Sea, I mean, there are unbelievable shoals of herring in the North Sea, and we reckon if we could open that up as an audience, you know, that's a huge audience.
A whole new market.
That's right.
Yeah, just encourage these folks to go to the theatre. Yeah. Well, good luck to you in that venture.
Haddock and cod, you know, there's a lot there.
You're living in, you live in London, but you're actually from Wales,
yes.
right? Do you sound like a Welshman now?
No,
or
no,
sound
no,
like
I
an
don't.
Englishman?
No, I mean, it's funny. I suddenly realised about a few years ago that people used to sort of get a bit sort of upset by me. You know, I get so, you know, I'd be like this, you know, getting very excited and things, and people going, well, you know, shying away. And eventually I suddenly realised it was my accent. I moved from Wales when I was about 5 and went to live in England, and I picked up this terrible English accent that I've got now. And if you get excited with a Welsh accent, you see, you go up at the end of the line. You see, so if you get excited, everybody knows you're just getting really excited about something. But if you do it with an English accent, you go down at the end of every line, and everybody thinks you're telling them off or being, you know, sort of, I'm getting very excited. So I tone myself down, you know.
Yeah. Now, what is the native language of Welsh?
It is Welsh.
Yes.
Now, it is Welsh.
Oh.
You know, ironically enough. Yes.
Now, what does that sound like?
Oh, I can't really. I don't speak any Welsh, but it's very sort of nostalgic. It's all very sort of guttural.
Guttural.
Yes.
Yeah. It's. Is it a real language or just noises people make for the fun of it?
No, it's a real. It's a bit of both, you know. I mean, it's a real language.
Nasty feelings on the part of the...
Yeah, I think so, on the part of the Welsh, yes.
No chance of an uprising?
Well, there is a Welsh National Army, but it doesn't get very far. They do burn down... a lot of English people have holiday homes in Wales, and so they do tend to burn them down. So there is a slogan, the coal board have a slogan, you know, come home to a warm fire, you know, have a holiday home in Wales.
Another thing that I think is fascinating is you own your own brewery.
Yes.
Now, how do you do that? Is it a large brewery?
No, it's a tiny brewery. You know, yes, you could almost drink the entire contents of it in a couple of years. No, I just suddenly decided to start a brewery about sort of 6 years ago. I suddenly thought nobody's done it for a couple of 100 years. It'd be a nice thing to do. I couldn't see why not.
Yeah. Well, continued success with the brewery, and also, of course, the new publication, Fairy Tales and the Meaning of Life. Many, many projects. Thank you very much for being here. Terry Jones, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. Paul and the boys are going to play. Carlo DeVito is here, and Marty Short from SCTV right after this.